So in this video, we're going to do two examples of factoring, one where there's a 2 in the front for the value of A, and one where there's a 1 in the front for the value of A. So in example number 1, the first thing we want to factor is to find the numbers that represent A, B, and C. The first number attached to the x squared represents A. The center number attached to the x, which in this case is -9, represents B. And the last number represents C, and it's a positive 4. Once I have identified A, B, and C, I want to make the x. I'm going to be multiplying the numbers A times C and placing the center number B at the bottom. Here is my x. A is represented by the number 2. C is represented by the number 4. 2 times 4 is 8. At the bottom, I'm looking for the number that represents B, that's -9. So now we're going to go into figuring out what numbers multiply to 8, but add up to -9. So I'm going to be listing numbers that multiply to 8. Numbers that multiply to 8 are 1 and 8, as well as 2 and 4. Now the problem is that I want to be able to add up to a negative number. So in order for me to multiply to a positive and add to a negative, I would need all my numbers to be negative. -1 times -8 gives me a positive 8. And -2 times -4 gives me a positive 8. But what do they add up to? If I go -1 plus -8, I get -9. If I get -2 plus -4, I get -6. I want to make sure I can get a positive 8 and a -9. These two numbers here will give me the positive 8 and the -9. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be putting a -1 on the left, because that represents one of my factors, and -8 on the right. Multiplying these numbers gives me a positive 8. Adding these numbers gives me a -9. The last step I need to do is dealing with the fact that I have A equals to 2. So I'm going to be dividing both of my factors by A, which is the number 2. So I'm going to be divided by A. And now I want to create my parentheses. I want to create my factors. So I'm going to be doing two sets of parentheses since I have two factors, starting with x in the front for both. After the x, the first one is -1 over 2. The second factor, x minus 8 over 2, because it's negative. Now we're going to clean this up and we're going to simplify. So in this case, 2 is going to come up to the x. We want to get rid of that fraction. So here we're going to go 2x minus 1. Over here, 8 divided by 2 actually reduces. I don't need to take the 2 and flip it over. 8 divided by 2 is just 4. So this gives me x minus 4. These are my two factors, and I'm going to box it up. We're going to do that same process again, but with number 2. And the first thing we want to do when we're factoring is identify the numbers that represent A, B, and C. Now, if there is no number that's visible, it's actually a 1. In this case, A is the number 1. B is the number attached to the x, and in this case, it's a negative number, so B is -3. And my last number represents C. In this case, it's negative. -18 represents C. Next, I need to create my x. When I create my x, I'm going to be multiplying A and C to get the top number. I'm going to be dropping the center number, or the letter B, at the bottom. So I'm going to be making my x. A times C. A is the number 1. C is the number -18. So the number at the top is -18. Dropping down to the bottom, B is -3. I need to find numbers that multiply to negative 18 and add up to negative 3. So I'm going to be looking for these two numbers right here. So the first thing I want to do is take that negative 18 and I want to find numbers that multiply to negative 18. Now I got to be careful, there's a negative here, so I have more options than normal. It could be negative 1 and a positive 18. It could be a positive 1 and a negative 18. We could have a negative 3 and a positive 6, a positive 3 and a negative 6. We could also have a negative 2 and a 9, and a 2 and a negative 9. And we're going to check all of them because remember, our goal is to add up to negative 3. If I add negative 1 and a positive 18, that gives me 17. If I add these up, I get negative 17. Adding, I get a positive 9. Adding, I get a positive 3. Negative 3 and positive 6 gives me a positive 3. A positive 3 and a negative 6 gives me a negative 3. Negative 2 plus 9 gives me a positive 7. And 2 plus negative 9 gives me a negative 7. Again, I'm hoping to multiply to negative 18, but then add up to a negative 3. And right here is that negative 3 I'm looking for, which means I need to use the numbers 3 and negative 6 on the side. So I'm going to be putting my 3 here and my negative 6 on the side. Now again, we want to think about dividing by A. A is that number 1. Let's divide by A. Now anything divided by 1 is just itself. So when I write out my two factors, starting with the letter X, my first one is a positive 3, and my second one is a negative 6. Now because 3 divided by 1 is 3, and 6 divided by 1 is 6, this is just going to be X plus 3 and X minus 6. And these are my two factors. And those are two examples of factoring.